In the beginning of the story, we meet a quiet and shy boy named Calvin. He never liked talking to people and always kept to himself. While the world moved noisily around him, Calvin found comfort in his books and studies. His father and older brother had both been wrestling champions in their time, but Calvin was nothing like them. He lived at home with only his mother Sharon. When he was very young, his father had died in a tragic accident. After that painful loss, the family completely broke apart. His older brother Mike moved away to another city, and Mike and Sharon never got along with each other. One afternoon, Calvin was sitting beside the lake, trying to fix a water pump for his small fish farm. Out of nowhere, a bully from his school named Billy walked over and started picking on him. Calvin stood up bravely and tried to defend himself, but this only made Billy angrier. Billy shoved Calvin hard to the ground and walked away without looking back. As Calvin sat there staring at his wound, an old fisherman named Red appeared beside him. He looked at Calvin with calm and kind eyes and said, "Always believe in yourself. Never let evil win." Those words stayed with Calvin long after Red had gone. He quietly got up, walked home and cleaned his wounds alone. Whenever sadness crept in, Calvin would pull out a small memory box from its hiding place and sit with it for a while. That evening was no different. Inside the box were old photographs of his father and the accident report from the day he died. As Calvin looked at them, a familiar thought quietly came over him: if his father were still alive, how different would everything be? When Sharon came home, Calvin quickly shut the box and ran to greet her at the door. He never wanted his mother to see how much pain he carried inside. Sharon noticed his wound the moment she hugged him and got worried. Calvin simply smiled and told her he had bumped into a tree, nothing serious. Over the next few days, thoughts of his father and brother kept filling his mind. Their absence weighed heavily on his heart and he just couldn't shake it off. Then one day a single idea hit him: wrestling. If he learned wrestling, he would feel closer to his father and brother, like he was carrying on their legacy. But there was one big problem. Sharon hated wrestling with all her heart. So Calvin decided to keep it completely secret. For the next few weeks, he would come home after school and casually tell his mother there were extra activities. Instead, he would slip quietly into the school gym and sit in the corner, just watching the team practice, saying nothing. After a few days of watching from the sidelines, Calvin felt ready to step onto the mat himself. But the coach paired him with Billy as his practice partner and told Billy to take it easy with the new boy. Billy completely ignored those words. He came at Calvin with full force, beat him badly, and the coach had to rush in and stop the session. That night at dinner, Calvin could no longer carry the secret. He told Sharon everything, that he had joined the wrestling team and was working hard to stay at 135 pounds. Sharon understood deep down why he was doing it. She knew he was trying to reconnect with his father and brother through the sport they had loved. But having already lost her husband to tragedy and then Mike to distance and silence, she wanted nothing more to do with wrestling. She looked Calvin in the eyes and said firmly, "I will not support this. I don't want you anywhere near this game." Even after her sharp words, Calvin quietly began searching for his brother Mike's address. When he finally found it, he made up his mind he would go and visit Mike in person. He told Sharon he was going to spend the night at his friend Donald's house. She agreed without any suspicion. But Calvin never went to Donald's house. He walked straight to the bus stop and boarded a bus heading to the nearby city. During the long ride, his mind raced with questions he had no answers to. How will it feel to see Mike after all these years? Will he even be glad to see me? Or will he just be cold? Before he could find any answers, his stop arrived. Calvin got off the bus and walked through unfamiliar streets until he found Mike's house. He knocked on the door. Mike's girlfriend opened it and let him in. Calvin stepped inside slowly. When Mike looked up and saw him standing there, he was surprised, but only for a brief second. There was no warmth, no smile, no hug. His face was flat and empty, as if Calvin were just a stranger he passed on the street every day. He asked bluntly, "What are you doing here?" Calvin felt the wall between them immediately. But he didn't get angry or upset. He told himself, maybe it's just hard for Mike to open up after all these years apart. After an uncomfortable silence, Calvin gathered his courage and spoke. He told Mike that he had joined the school wrestling team and truly needed his guidance. He said, "If you train me, I know I can get better. Please help me." Mike's reply was short and cold, "I'm too busy. I don't have time. Calvin's heart dropped. But he swallowed his pain, gave a quiet nod and walked back out the door, still holding on to one small hope that someday things between him and Mike would heal. The moment Calvin left, something shifted inside Mike. He sat down on the sofa and didn't move for hours. Calvin's unexpected visit had stirred something deep in his heart, old memories, old regrets, and all the choices he had made that pushed his family away. The very next morning, Sharon went to Calvin's school and asked to speak with the wrestling coach. With a heavy heart, she told him, I have already lost one son to this sport. I cannot go through that pain again. The coach listened carefully and with deep respect. But he gently told her that pulling Calvin off the team would not be the right thing to do. He gave Sharon his word that he would personally watch over Calvin and keep him safe. Calvin had very few friends at school, just two people he truly felt comfortable with. His childhood neighbor Luna, who had grown up right beside him, and his reliable, honest classmate Donald. Then one day, without any warning, everything changed. During a school wrestling competition, a 135-pound player from Riverdale got badly injured and had to pull out of the match. Calvin was called in to fill his spot immediately. His stomach knotted with nerves. He grabbed his phone and called Mike right away, but Mike's girlfriend picked up. Calvin left a short, hopeful message, "Please tell Mike I have a match on Friday." He waited the entire week, eyes on his phone, hoping. But Friday arrived with complete silence. No call. No message. Nothing from Mike. And when the moment finally came, when Calvin walked out under the bright gym lights and looked straight ahead, his opponent was already standing there across from him, steady and ready. Calvin stepped onto the mat and faced his opponent, but his courage was shaking from the inside. Fear had taken over and he began to wonder if he had made the wrong decision. Meanwhile, Sharon, who had always been against wrestling, pushed her feelings aside and came to school to support her son anyway. On her way in, she noticed the school's wall of fame, a display of trophies and awards, some of them carrying the names of her late husband and eldest son. She stopped and stood there quietly for a moment, lost in old memories she had tried so hard to leave behind. When the match began, everything Calvin feared came true. His opponent hit him hard and fast, giving him no room to breathe. Sharon and Luna watched from the stands with worry in their eyes. In the end, Calvin lost. After that defeat, the real weight of wrestling hit him. He thought seriously about walking away from it all. But there was only one player in his team at his weight, which meant he had no choice. He could not step back now. Calvin lost again and again in the matches that followed. Every defeat was painful, and the embarrassment in front of his teammates and classmates was hard to carry. On the other side of town, things were falling apart for Mike too. He had lost his job and was drifting through his days with nothing to do. One evening he walked into a small bar just to pass the time. Without any warning, a stranger started a fight with him and threw the first punch. Mike defended himself, but when the police arrived, they did not listen to his side of the story. They arrested him and took him to jail. Back at school, Calvin was deep in his own worries about training. One day as he and Donald were leaving school, they ran into Billy. In front of everyone, Billy mocked Calvin's brother Mike and pulled out a newspaper showing the report of Mike's arrest. Calvin felt a sharp pain in his chest seeing that. He quietly walked back to the lake and there, just like before, he found Red sitting by the water. Red looked at him steadily and said, "I can tell you with confidence, your brother needs you right now." Those words were enough. Calvin made up his mind. The very next morning, Calvin went to Luna's house and borrowed her scooter. He told his mother he had to get to school early. But he didn't go to school. He drove straight to the courthouse. Inside, Mike's lawyer stood before the judge and asked for bail. Just as the judge was about to make his decision, Calvin stood up from his seat and spoke. "Your Honor, I am Mike's younger brother. Please release him today. We will never appear in your court again." The words hit Mike like a wave. For the first time in years, he saw how much his little brother truly cared. After court, the two brothers walked out together. Something had shifted between them. Mike looked at Calvin differently now, and that same day he made a quiet decision to start training Calvin in wrestling. Meanwhile, Sharon had been worried sick all day, not hearing a word from Calvin. She went to school looking for him but found nothing. She asked Luna, but Luna didn't know anything either. When Calvin finally came home that evening, he told his mother he had been with friends, and went straight to his room without another word. Over the next few weeks, Calvin stopped going to school regularly. When he finally returned to practice, the coach pulled him aside and spoke to him seriously. "We missed a match because of you. If this happens again, you are off the team." What the coach did not know was that Calvin had been spending every one of those days training with Mike. The two brothers practiced together every single day. And slowly the wall between them began to come down. They started to understand each other better, to talk more, to laugh again. Calvin listened carefully to every word Mike said and threw himself into learning wrestling with complete dedication. When Calvin noticed that Mike still had not found a new job, he quietly started looking around for work opportunities for his brother. Mike was deeply touched by this. The two brothers were now closer than they had ever been. Then the next match came around and Calvin wanted Mike there in the crowd watching him. He invited him with all his heart. But Mike paused and said softly, "I'm not ready to face the school or the family yet. People will ask me where I've been all these years, and I won't have a good answer." Calvin understood. He didn't push. On the day of the match, Calvin walked in with a different look in his eyes. He stared straight at his opponent, and this time the fear inside him was much quieter than before. He found a calm corner, put on his favorite music, closed his eyes and got himself ready. In the stands, Donald, Luna and Sharon were all there waiting for him. When the match started, it was clear that Calvin had grown. He moved with confidence, used every technique Mike had taught him and kept his nerves under control. He played smart, stayed focused and won. What nobody in the crowd knew was that Mike had quietly slipped into the school. He didn't go inside the hall. He stood near a wall at the back and watched the match from a distance. The moment he saw Calvin win, a look of deep pride spread across his face. Somewhere in the crowd, Red was also sitting quietly, watching, smiling, happy for the boy he had believed in from the very beginning. But Mike didn't want to be seen. He slipped out before the match was even over. As he walked through the school hallways on his way out, memories came flooding back, of the time when he himself had walked these same halls and done great things here. Calvin kept winning in the weeks that followed. And every single time, Mike would find a quiet spot somewhere nearby and watch from a distance, unseen. Watching Calvin improve match by match, Mike began to feel something stir inside him, the sense that his younger brother was ready for something truly big. Then one day Calvin asked with a grin, "So are you going to teach me the reverse cradle now?" Mike shook his head immediately. That move was far too risky and Calvin was not ready for it yet. A few days later, the school was getting ready for its annual dance function. All the students were excited about it. Luna walked up to Calvin with a smile and asked, "Will you come with me?" Calvin smiled back and said yes without a second thought. Around the same time, Mike introduced Calvin to another fighter named Theo, who joined their training sessions. For the next few weeks, Calvin pushed himself harder than ever before. He kept his diet clean and stayed disciplined. Slowly but surely he began to see real changes in his body. He was getting stronger, faster, and more confident. On the day of the dance, Sharon noticed that Luna had no one to help her get ready. Luna's mother was not around. She lived at home with just her father and 4 brothers. So Sharon stepped in warmly and helped Luna prepare. Meanwhile, Mike had been watching his younger brother train day after day, and something in his heart finally gave way. He looked at Calvin and said, "You are ready now. I will teach you the reverse cradle." Calvin's eyes lit up with excitement. The two brothers spent hours that day drilling that one difficult move together, over and over again. That night, Calvin and Luna arrived at the school dance together. The evening was going beautifully, music, laughter, and good energy all around. Then Billy showed up. He walked straight over to Luna and started behaving badly with her. Luna tried to handle it herself, but Calvin stepped in front of her. And without much effort at all, he took Billy down to the ground. The situation had completely flipped. Calvin was no longer the boy Billy used to push around. He was stronger now and everyone could see it. After the dance, Calvin and Luna walked out of school together and strolled through the city streets, talking about everything and nothing. Calvin looked at her and made a quiet promise, "I will always stand by your side." That night brought the two of them much closer than before. After weeks of hard training, Mike decided to step out one evening to relax a little. He walked into a small bar and ordered a drink, but the moment it was placed in front of him, memories came flooding back. He thought of Calvin standing up in that courtroom and speaking for him. He thought of the promise his little brother had made. He quietly pushed the glass away, got up and walked out without paying. But trouble was waiting for him outside. As soon as he stepped out, he was surrounded by the same group of people he had fought with the last time. Mike tried to stay calm and talk his way out of it, but they were not interested in talking. He had no choice but to defend himself. He fought back and managed to hold his ground, but in the end he collapsed and fainted. The following evening, Calvin went to their usual training spot, but Mike was not there. Calvin assumed he was caught up with something and trained alone for a few hours before heading home. The moment he stepped inside the house, he stopped in his tracks. He could hear his mother's voice. She was on the phone with Mike. The police had picked Mike up again after the fight. The argument at home started quickly. Sharon was convinced it was Mike's fault again. But as the tension in the room grew, Calvin stood up for his brother with everything he had. He told his mother firmly, "Mike would never let me down. He must have been set up. He hasn't even touched alcohol for the past month." Then Calvin said something that stopped Sharon cold. He told her that the only reason he had been winning his matches was because of Mike. Sharon stood there in shock. Calvin's voice rose with emotion. "He is my brother. I have every right to know him. What are you still so afraid of, Mom?" In jail, Mike sat alone, tired, frustrated, and blaming his own luck. He could not understand why trouble kept finding him no matter how hard he tried to do the right thing. Back at home, Calvin sat quietly and let his thoughts settle. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that all the pain, distance, and silence in his family traced back to one single event, the accident. He gently brought it up with Sharon. At the sound of her late husband Mac's name, Sharon's eyes filled with tears. But she took a deep breath, gathered herself, and finally told Calvin the truth he had never known. She told him that Mac was not just Mike's trainer, he was also his closest friend. The two of them shared everything, and wrestling was the center of their world. Then, about 10 years ago, Mike was preparing for an important match. Mac had complete faith that his son would win. But Mike suggested they drive to the next city to watch the opponent train, to study how he moved and fought. Mac was hesitant at first. Sharon told them not to go. It was snowing heavily and the roads were dangerous. But Mac and Mike got into the car anyway. On the way, the car lost control and crashed. Mike was thrown out of the car and survived, but Mac did not make it. Calvin sat in complete silence after hearing this. He thought about how heavy that guilt must have felt for Mike, carrying it alone for all these years. He felt his mother's pain deeply. But more than anything, his heart broke for his brother. Now, for the first time, he truly understood why Mike had always seemed so empty, so distant, so closed off from the world. A few days later, Calvin traveled with his school team to a district-level tournament. His friends Donald and Luna were there in the stands, cheering loudly for him. Calvin won match after match and pushed his way through to the semi-finals. But even in the middle of his victories, his mind kept drifting back to one question: what is happening with Mike right now? The worry became too much to carry. He left his friends behind and went home. Back home, Sharon had also made a quiet but powerful decision. She believed Mike was telling the truth. So she went back to the bar, tracked down the witnesses who had been there that night, and spoke to them one by one. What she found confirmed everything. Mike had not been drinking that night, and the attackers had deliberately gone after him. Armed with this information, Sharon reached out to the DA's office and the parole officer and worked out a deal that could get Mike released. Then she went straight to the jail and stood in front of her eldest son for the first time in years. She looked at him with both pain and love and said, "I want my son back. I just don't know how to get there." Even after reaching the semi-finals of the tournament, Calvin did not celebrate. His mind was somewhere else entirely. Meanwhile, Sharon had managed to get Mike released from jail and brought him home. But the house felt cold, heavy, and hollow from the inside. Looking around at the emptiness, Sharon's heart broke. She could see it clearly now. Mike had been quietly punishing himself for years, carrying the weight of that one terrible accident all alone. And in that moment she also realized something else, that all Calvin had ever truly wanted was to bring his family back together. For the first time in years, Sharon opened her heart and spoke honestly to Mike. She told him everything she had kept locked inside. Mike sat and listened to every single word without interrupting. When she finished, something broke open between them. Sharon's eyes filled with tears and she pulled her son into a long, tight hug. The first real hug they had shared since that tragic accident had torn their family apart. That night, Calvin came home and walked straight to Sharon. He asked what had happened with Mike's case. When Sharon told him Mike was free, Calvin's face broke into a wide smile. Then he shared his own news. "I won, Mom. I beat everyone." Sharon looked at him with soft eyes and said, "Well done, my son. Keep going. Keep wrestling." The next day was the final round. The gym was buzzing with noise and excitement. Calvin, as always, found a quiet corner to sit alone and mentally prepare himself before the match. But this time something felt different. Sitting there in the silence, a heavy feeling settled over him. He realized that he had never really been fighting for wrestling. His real fight had always been to bring his family back together. And now, looking around and not seeing Mike or Sharon in the stands, he began to wonder if he had already lost that fight. Overwhelmed and confused, Calvin got up and walked out of the arena. That was when he ran into Red. As always, Red appeared at exactly the right moment when Calvin needed someone the most. Just seeing Red's calm face was enough. Something clicked back into place inside Calvin. He turned around, walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, wiped his tears and walked back out to the mat with his head up. Before the match began, Calvin scanned the stands. He spotted his mother sitting with his friends, and that gave him a small wave of peace. But Mike was not there. The questions hit him hard and fast. Where is my brother? How could he miss the biggest match of my life? Did everything we shared these past few weeks mean nothing? With all these thoughts swirling in his head, Calvin stepped onto the mat, and it showed. His opponent hit him again and again in the opening minutes. Calvin was barely holding on, just waiting for it to be over. Then, in the middle of all that pain, he caught a movement near the entrance. Mike walked into the gym wearing his old school jersey, and found a seat in the stands with quiet pride. The moment Calvin saw him, everything changed. A surge of energy rushed through him. He reset his feet, cleared his mind, and flipped the match completely. Using every technique Mike had drilled into him, he fought back and won. Mike rushed down to Calvin right after and spoke quickly but with full conviction. "Stay focused. Give everything you have. This is the biggest match of your life." There were only a few minutes left before the final. Mike stepped back and gave Calvin his space, letting him put on his music and find his rhythm. When the final match began, Calvin walked onto the mat with a powerful and confident entry. The energy in the gym shot up instantly. Every eye in the room was locked on him. Then, just before stepping onto the mat, Calvin noticed something strange from a distance. Mike was standing near the side talking to an old man. Calvin squinted. The old man was Red. A wave of surprise washed over Calvin. How does my brother know Red? And then, like pieces of a puzzle snapping together, the truth hit him all at once. Red was not just a fisherman by the lake. Red was his father's coach. When the final match officially started, Mike took a seat right beside the team coach. Over the announcement system, Mike's name was called out. The crowd was reminded that their school's undisputed champion was sitting in the room with them that day. The energy in the gym surged even higher. Calvin gave the final match everything he had. Every move was watched in tense silence. The crowd held their breath with every exchange. But in the end, his opponent made some brilliant moves at the crucial moment and Calvin lost. On paper it was a defeat. But for Calvin, the truth felt completely different. He had already won something far greater. His family was standing together again, and that was the only victory that had ever truly mattered. Calvin walked straight to Mike and thanked him with all his heart for everything he had taught him. Then he went to Sharon and Luna and thanked them too for never leaving his side, even when things were hard. Standing there in that gym, surrounded by the people he loved, Calvin understood something deep and simple: winning is not just a result. The journey you take to get there is everything. A little while later, Mike quietly took a seat in the stands next to his family. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, people in the crowd began to stand up, until the entire gym was on its feet, giving Mike a long, thunderous standing ovation. Mike sat there, completely still, overwhelmed by the sight of so many people showing him that kind of respect and love. After all those years of silence, distance, and pain, he was finally home. If you liked the story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching.